Hi, everyone. I'm Carmen Rios, the managing digital editor at Ms., and I'm here with Shamim Sharif, the author of the Athena Protocol. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Absolute pleasure.
And I'm like, just as a quick primer for everyone, I feel like it's a fair summary to say that this is a YA novel about a diverse group of lady spies who take down human traffickers.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
And I am really curious about where it came from. Like, where did the book come from? The idea, the characters?
Sure. Well, I was going to TED conferences a lot back in the day, and I was sitting in these audiences with these, you're surrounded by amazing people, and there are all these tech entrepreneurs on the stage who've made tons of money, and now they're kind of trying to solve sanitation or world hunger and the big problems of the world. And I guess that's where I got the idea of, what if you had this group of successful women who thought nothing's really being done fundamentally about, human trafficking, issues to do with women and children are often put on the back burner by governments, they don't have the budget. So what if they decided to get involved? And I like that because A, those are issues that are dear to me, but also because I think that they are, it's something that where moral boundaries come up, basically. Once you're fighting human trafficking, there's gonna be possibly violence, physicality, surveillance, privacy laws get broken. So they're crossing lines that I thought would be interesting to explore morally as well.
Yeah, and what made you want to do something like this as a YA book, sort of like for younger women to also be able to access?
Sure. I mean, I'll be honest, when I was writing it, and this is true of anything that I write, I never think about it in terms of, I want to write this genre. I just kind of write the story that I want to tell. And with this, there are three older women, I mean, not that old, like my age, fairly young women, but they have grown up families or whatever the case might be. And then they use younger female agents. So there are three who are fairly young. They have very interesting backstories. There's maybe a little bit of immaturity floating around there. And I thought, for me, I love everything to be character driven. So even though this was a thriller in terms of plot twists and reversals and that kind of thing, I wanted it all to be very character driven. And for me, the youngest agent, Jessie, who's also the most immature and has the most to learn about being a team player, I thought was an interesting way into that story. So it's told from Jessie's perspective. And she's not always a reliable narrator either, but I guess that's why it kind of fit the YA mold too.
Yeah, well, and when it comes to the characters, I mean, the characters are they represent so many different diverse identities and experiences. Yeah. And when I was thinking about this interview today, I was also thinking about an interview we just posted this week with Nia Malika Dixon, the filmmaker and showrunner, and she was talking about writing basically a true crime series and men not being able to see a Black Muslim woman as a Michael Corleone, even though that was how she saw this character. And I was curious, like, how do these identities that aren't necessarily always in the genre, how do they change or shape the story, and what things don't change based on sort of, it's a female spy, but the spy genre still holds up in this way? Like, how did it shape the story?
I think it shaped it very much. And for me, showing that diversity was just because that's the kind of life I live. And I think it's the kind of life a lot of women and people live generally. And I don't think it's as reflected. I mean, there's a lot more diversity on screen and in books. But sometimes you feel like it's, we could make that character gay, so let's do that. Or we could make that character black, right? And that's progress, but it's not. I wanted something that was authentic to the experience of living as I do, and as the Athena team are based in London, which is kind of a capital for people from the Middle East, from the States, from Africa. And so it was really interesting to me to have this group of women who are from all different walks of life. And, in the case of the younger agents, to have an ISIS survivor who had been thought of as potentially a terrorist to be somebody who's also on Jessie's team, Hala. And so I thought it was a good way to explore the fact that the world is that diverse now, and that really what binds us together is less and less commonalities of race, religion, nationalism, and more commonalities of values. And for these women, they're all on the same team for the same reasons. They don't always see eye to eye. They sometimes drive each other crazy, but they've all got that same core value system.
Yeah. And I mean, I also love, we've definitely seen, I mean, anecdotally, I've just noticed sort of a rush of new books that are, you know, feminist, sci-fi or thrillers in this vein of like either sort of, you know, feminist dystopia books like The Handmaid's Tale and sort of books that are modeled after that, or books like these where it's sort of like women stepping up but in some sort of vigilante justice situation or otherwise in a sort of, you know, boundary breaking way. What's it like to be releasing a book into the wild right now that's about this subject, that's sort of based in a world that's so familiar to the one we're in right now, in this moment in time where like the Epstein case has been unfolding? Like, what was it like to sort of watch it, and what was the reception like?
You know, because obviously this gets written along a lot before that happened with Epstein, for example. But unfortunately, it just brought home to me that it's always going to be topical, at least in the near future. So I think the issues that the Athena team are going up against, whether it's trafficking, whether it's child marriage, or whatever it might be in the next book, there are always going to be things that need to be addressed in the real world. Now, whether they're addressing it the right way with vigilante justice, you can flip back and forth on. And the other thing with that is I also wanted to show women who weren't in a dystopian world, who were in a world that we can recognize as being reality. Even if it's unlikely this team could survive in the real world without being found out, everything technology-wise or the methods that they use, the way that they think, feels like it could be happening in the world now. And based on that, it was also important for me to have a spy genre with women that wasn't about, you know, now we finished work for the day, we'll toss back our hair and toss back a vodka, you know, and there is a bit of that element where we want to be more James Bond than James Bond. But the reality is, if you are a female spy and you come home and now you have to deal with your mom or whatever, you know, it's just like they have normal lives or loneliness or PTSD or whatever it is that has come with them from their previous lives and made them such good spies. It's also that messy personal world that I thought would be really interesting to bring in.
Yeah, well, and how does your own experience, you've talked about sort of these issues being really important to you, how did your feminism shape the story? I mean, obviously, I'm assuming it had a big deal in the conception of the story, but how does it sort of shape your process as a writer in general?
I think it's probably the most important part of my work as a storyteller. And I don't know if when I started it was super conscious and I was like, oh, I'm going to go write feminist stuff. For me, I was just writing the stories that I felt needed to be told and that I wasn't finding anywhere. So with The World Unseen, you know, my first book, it was about reimagining my grandmother's history growing up as an Indian Muslim woman in 1950 South Africa. So in a way, she had it from all sides. It was like the Indian Muslim patriarchy that put her into a certain box and said you have to be in an arranged marriage and have 5 kids by this time. And on top of that, the race relations in apartheid, they also suffered under that. So there was another political kind of pressure on top of all of that. But I wasn't interested in just kind of rehashing that, even at that time. It was about reconceiving it and saying, okay, I can understand why my grandmother felt at that time, I have no choices, this is my lot in life. And she, you know, unfortunately she died feeling that way. You know, that was, her life was lived for her. And I just thought, who would she have to meet? How would she have to think to kind of switch that and to have that glimmer open in your mind that there's a different reality possible? And I think that's something that is always interesting to me in stories, especially for women who culturally have been taught traditionally that this is your role. Yeah, this is the path you have to take through life, which was also for me to a certain extent, you know, being with a woman, having 2 children in that relationship 20 years ago, 25 years ago was not enthralling to anybody's parents, you know, in that scenario. So it was kind of like a real switch to kind of negotiate and say, okay, this is okay. And I'm going to do it even if everybody else says it's wrong. So that's, I guess, always informed my storytelling.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I mean, I love too that, you know, you wrote this essay that we also published that touched on a lot of that, and sort of the reception that your other work, your films and your books have sort of spurred on from these other women and the revelations that they got out of this work. What was the impact you were hoping the Athena Protocol would have?
I was amazed by the impact I Can't Think Straight in The World Unseen had. Really, I wasn't expecting it. And I think that was just a lack of representation. 10 years ago, women of color and women of color in relationships, sometimes with each other, sometimes that were just against the patriarchal world that they were in. And people were kind of thirsty for that. So I think with the Athena Protocol, I think politically now we're living in a time where a lot of the democracy, the reproductive rights, the basic stuff that informs our lives as women that we've taken for granted for a while is beginning to be eroded or feel under threat or feel attacked in the media. And so I think it's an interesting time for the Athena Protocol because it talks about taking back power from governments, taking it into your own hands. And I'm not saying we'll have to start an agency. But, it's kind of
we could.
But we could. Yes, I'll talk about that another time. But the point being that it's kind of, I think it's time for individuals and corporations, because they have so much more power and influence now, to be really thoughtful about how they use their power. All of us using our voice. You can see that in the protests in Hong Kong with climate change. And then on a grander scale, if you're a big corporation or a very wealthy individual, what are your responsibilities to give back to the world? And I think that's a really interesting discussion to have right now, especially when people all over the world, with Brexit, with Trump, with Bolsonaro in Brazil not taking care of the Amazon, there's a lot of the reliance on governments is not going to do it anymore, is my feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know you just wrote a book that just came out, but what do you think is next? Is there something next for the book?
Yes, we are in LA actually having meetings to finalize a film and TV deal. So, that may take some time, but it's something that I will be involved with, which is great in the writing and directing. But I think we're looking at pursuing that as a TV show. And I also need to deliver edits on the second book of the series, which is called The Shadow Mission, which is already written, but just in the edit phase now, and that will be out next October as well. So it'll be the second installment of the adventures of Jessie and her team, basically.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. And that gives everyone time to buy this one, to buy the Athena Protocol and read it before the next one comes out. And then I'm just curious too, I love that your work, that you've now sort of produced this body of work that has lived on in different formats, that a lot of your work has sort of gone from, book to screen. What is that for you as a writer who's been bringing these stories to life in a way where we sort of have to visualize it ourselves as readers? Yeah. How has that process impacted the work that you do? And has it shaped it in both directions?
I think, on the one hand, I try to, when I'm writing a novel, I stay as a novelist, because I think if you start to cross-pollinate that too early, you end up with something that's neither here nor there. So I'm always very focused on, some things occur to me first as a book, and that was the case with the Athena Protocol. But I think it would make a good screen adaptation too. So that now I move into that head. But I think my experience writing and directing before with my other books also taught me a lot about things that were useful with something that's a thriller and action based story like Athena, because it taught me to turn a scene in every scene. And I brought a little bit of that to the book, even though there's a bit more room to breathe, so that even if it's not, how's Jessie going to get out of this situation, it could be an emotional turn. It's like, oh my God, she slammed the door on Hala, and now how are they going to make it back? Because, so I try to bring some of that to it, so that the story is always moving forward. So I guess, and for me, I'm lucky to think of myself as a storyteller in all these different genres. I can't think straight. We're pursuing as a Broadway musical now. So I think it's exciting that there are so many different media to work in. And I'm just along for the ride right now.
Well, I can't wait to see what it looks like on screen, to see what comes next, and everyone should go out and buy the Athena Protocol.
Please, yes, that would be great, and let me know what you think. That is me on social media, so I'm always open to the 5-star reviews and everything else.
And thank you so much for being here with us today.
No, thank you for having me.
For coming on out.
Loved it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.